It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk about Mark Shapiro, who is TKO Holdings president, because he gave an interview. Oh, actually, it wasn't an interview. He spoke to Goldman Sachs and said a lot of very interesting things. And then we're going to spend some time talking about some other stuff. So first things first, though, let's check in with the guy here and see how he's been.
Spectacular.
Oh, I love that. Why is life so spectacular?
I don't know. I just said spectacular. It just came to mind. Spectacular. The weather's not hot here anymore now. Although the San Bernardino's on fire. So the hills, the mountains.
That sucks.
So, no, yeah. Air quality would be terrible tomorrow. So I'm not looking forward to that.
Ugh. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Well, let's go ahead and trudge onward right now. And let's go ahead and get our first question in. Because TKO President Mark Shapiro, speaking to Goldman Sachs Communacopia and Technology, boy, that's a mouthful. He was speaking to them and he had a lot of interesting tidbits to go over. But the first thing that stood out to you, I know, was that he spoke about the class action settlement. Can you take us through what he said and what it means?
Well, if you listen to him, it's obvious he expressed frustration with the judge, that it was unheard of or uncalled for the judge to deny the settlement. He did point out, I tweeted this, he pointed out that not just the defendants, his side, the UFC wanted the settlement, the plaintiffs wanted it. And in the courtroom, he quoted the plaintiff's attorneys when they said, talking about Johnson, that they wanted a settlement because they don't have a case. Going forward, they can't find other attorneys to take over the case because it's, and what he didn't spell out, though, he made it sound a little bit like, as he's speaking to the people there, that the reason, that they don't have a case and it's just a bad case and it's weak. The truth is when the attorney said that, they were talking about how all the fighters, or at least a large portion of them, have signed class action waivers and arbitration agreements that make it very difficult to continue that case under the current legality of those waivers and provisions. So that's a little side there. But anyways, he talked about that they're still going to work on the settlement. And if they do not get a settlement, if they get a ruling against them, if the judge, or shouldn't say the judge, but the jury rules against them and they're ordered to pay a large amount of money, they're going to appeal. They're going to take it as far as possible. And they are very confident, according to him, on the merits of the case in their favor. So that's what he went over, basically.
When you say the case and the class waivers, are we speaking, which case are we speaking to?
I should be clear about that. He was talking, the case, I guess the trial upcoming, when that's mentioned, he's talking about the Kung Lee case, Lee et al. V. Zuffa, which covers from 2010 to 2017, anybody that fought in the UFC during that period. The other class action that's undertaking is the Johnson v. Zuffa case, Johnson et al. V. Zuffa case, and that covers from July 1st, 2017 on. And so he was talking about that there was no merit to the case, not no merit, but that they have no case. And that was reference to the Johnson case, because all those fighters, not all, but everybody now apparently, but a large percentage have signed class action waivers. That makes it very difficult to continue. The other case that's going to trial is the Lee case. That's the one that if they have a bad ruling against them, if the jury rules against them, they promise to go to the appeal. And you can kind of infer what he's saying. There's probably several targets with his comments. One is the plaintiff side. He's probably saying a message to them that we are going to fight very hard. The amount that we give up. So don't expect us to give you a ton of stuff that, this is basically the line in the sand negotiation. They're willing to fight this. So don't think you can play chicken with us by going to trial. And two, the more primary audience was more likely the investors that do not worry that no matter what we have thought about this, and this will not impact our business. So don't sell the stocks, in other words. So I think that's the two audiences for that message.
All right. What news did he have about broadcast negotiations since UFC's deal with ESPN is up in 2025?
Well, this was the first time mentioned, I think, is the window of exclusive negotiations. I think it's the end of 2025, their ESPN deal's up. So 2026. So that's right.
Gotcha.
That's technically, you're right. 2025, it's up, the very end of 2025.
Okay.
But then they were talking about the first time I think mentioned was the exclusive negotiating period, which would have been January 15th of this year through April 15th of next year, I believe it is. I might be mistaken. It might be April 15th of this year through January 15th of next year. Anyways, the exclusive negotiating period ends early next year. After that, they can speak to other potential broadcasters, but they made it clear they want to stick with ESPN. I don't know if they really want to stick with ESPN or they're just trying to get the message out that ESPN come full board with a great offer. But they seem to be, that was the message they were sending, is that we want to stick to ESPN. And I can kind of see why. ESPN has been a pretty good platform for them. We saw when they went to ESPN, their pay-per-view sales went up a lot. ESPN has a very strong promotional arm. So there's a lot of benefits, at least having part of their product on ESPN. And I'm sure they would like ESPN to come with a huge offer to make sure they stick around. The question is, does ESPN have the financial resources anymore to keep a UFC? That's the big question. But for right now, their exclusive negotiating periods, if they don't have a deal with ESPN, by the time that ends, then I think we'll start looking at someone else will get the UFC, or at least they might split up the product into, which they've hinted at several times and even said it, that they can split it up into various trenches.
Speaking of that, I have a quick side question here. They seem to have changed their tune from, a month and a half, 2 months ago when they said, we are more than happy to split it up between Amazon, Netflix, etc. But now it seems like they changed their tune. Could it be that maybe those streaming giants aren't as interested right now, and now they need to stick all those eggs back in the ESPN basket?
No, I don't quite think that's it. I think the thing is, you got to remember one is there's no other sports properties up. So UFC's in a very special position, a very envious position, that they have no one else that's competing with the TV deal. So they should get a good deal. But the other thing is, Endeavor has proven to be incredibly greedy, right? Yes. Even more greedy than the original owners of the UFC. And so they want to maximize their TV deal. I think they're guaranteed to get a much better deal than what they have now. The question is, can they get the size of deal they probably want to shoot for? And they had the same problem when they bought the UFC. Remember when they bought the UFC, their internal memos, which I saw their internal presentations, they were claiming that their domestic deal would be around 400, and this is excluding pay-per-view, would be like the $400 to $450 million category. And it ended up being $300 million. So, $150 million less than what they were claiming it was going to be. Still a huge deal, ended up being tremendously profitable for the UFC, but not the monstrous deal that they had expected. And so I think we're kind of looking at this, that they're going to get a big deal with whoever they go with. The streaming services will offer it, or, ESPN. I think they also want to make sure all sides are nervous about the other sides, especially ESPN, because think of it this way. ESPN has the exclusive rights to negotiate now, so they want to get the best deal out of them now, because after they go to negotiate with the other entities, ESPN will probably pull the offer off the table. So the best offer you can get from ESPN is probably now. So they probably want to make ESPN as scared as possible that the other entities are possible for them. But I think, like I said, what's going to happen, I got to expect they're going to get a good deal from someone, but I am betting that internally they were shooting for a much bigger deal than they'll get. And that seems to be the case with Morgan Stanley. Had a projection that the bear model, which I think the UFC is shooting for, is like 2.5 times the current deal. And the more realistic expectation is, 1.5 to 2 times what they're currently getting.
What did he say about the future of pay-per-view?
Well, this is interesting because this is kind of like, a shot against the bow of ESPN. They talked about, right now they've handed over everything to ESPN to take care of their pay-per-view. And Dana White was against it, he noted originally, but it's turned out great for the UFC, as they also noted. But he talked about, we can go back in-house and basically sell piecemeal. That's a possibility. So that's, basically, I guess a shot against ESPN. Like, listen, if you want to keep this deal, you got to offer a lot because we can do it ourselves. But they also talked about how splitting it up, and the way he talked about it, it's also a possibility that they probably would package all the pay-per-views together, right? And so you could have the regular stuff on ESPN and all the pay-per-views on Amazon or Netflix. But the way he talked, maybe it's possible they divide the pay-per-views in half, 6 for one and 6 for another. That's another possibility. Or 6 of the pay-per-views go on a streaming service and the other 6 go back kind of a traditional you pay per buy pay-per-view, pay-per-view you pay to buy on demand. That's a possibility. But he left it open that they have a lot of options with pay-per-view. And all the talk that Turki Al-Sheikh is getting rid of pay-per-view, it doesn't seem like the UFC is concerned about that.
What about UFC sponsorship? Because I know he, in particular, has been salivating at the mouth talking about how big they want sponsorship to be.
Well, sponsorship, he pointed out exact numbers. Well, I shouldn't say exact, but ballpark numbers of how much it's grown for UFCs under their management. When they bought the company, he talked about they were doing $30 to $40 million a year in sponsorship. I think that's a little bit off. It might have been contractual sponsorship he's talking about, because you look at their old financials, they were doing about $50 million in sponsorship at the time. But he says 30 to 40 million, and they're now up to 200 million a year in sponsorship. That's just tremendous growth. Obviously, that really is through the roof type growth of sponsorship. And he talks about there's still room to go continue, and they're going to do that same thing now with WWE, which apparently it sounds like just plastering sponsorship all over the WWE mat, which they used to not do. I don't follow WWE, but as a fan, I'm sure you'll see, if you're watching WWE, you'll start seeing a lot more sponsors. And we also point out the Sports Business Journal had a thing, I think came out today, talking about how the Sphere is going to be the biggest individual show for sponsorship they've ever had.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's, one thing Endeavor's done, they focus on sponsorship. He stressed how blue chip and high profile sponsorship is, and they might be moving more to that. But I do know for a while, and we've talked about this in the past, they focused a lot on second B or C tier sponsorship for the UFC. And it now seems like maybe there's now starting to go back to trying to get major sponsors. But I looked at their newest big sponsors, and they were Wingstop. I don't know how big Wingstop is. Dude Wipes is a new sponsor. That doesn't sound like a major A-list sponsor to me. And I cannot for the life of me remember the third one, but it was not, in my book, was not a major sponsor.
What about DraftKings? What slice of their sponsorship would you estimate for DraftKings, since they seem to be everywhere? To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Okay, the face!